Why Shakespeare did not write the Shakespeare canon, with documents to prove it. This is part 1. And hi, my name is Robert Boog, and I am the author of Shakey's Madness. I also am a licensed real estate broker who lives in Valencia, California. And in this video, we will look closely at William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon, aka Stratford, and what disqualifies him as the author. And we'll discuss why Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, aka Oxford, is most likely the real author. Now, is questioning Stratford's education being classist? There are people who will say it's almost all fundamentally classist. It implies no one who's not wealthy or noble could have created something that beautiful. Or let's say sheer snobbery. They are uncomfortable with the idea that a professional actor with an average education should have written great literature. By the end of this video, I will revisit this question and ask you how you feel about it. Now first, let's go over Oxford's Greek and Latin education. His first tutor was a man by the name of Sir Thomas Smith, who was a Cambridge scholar, who started teaching him Greek and Latin at age 4. Oxford was also tutored by Lawrence Noel. Noel, a scholar of Anglo-Saxon literature, translated Old English law from Latin. And when he was 12, Oxford had a daily routine that included an hour of French, an hour of Latin, then in the afternoon, Latin, again in French. And what's funny, we noticed dancing here. Because it's kind of funny because back then there was no boombox radio or no radio whatsoever, no Spotify. So they would have to haul in musicians to play the music, right? Okay, what about Stratford's Latin education? Stratfordians tell us Stratford had a great grammar school. It's now the King Edward School. Stratford would have had some very good masters, Oxford graduates. The curriculum would have offered an education in Latin. So let's open this up. And this is from the Birthplace Trust. And Sir Stanley Wells is the one who says this. You know, Stratford had a great grammar school. And, Oxford graduates, we know that. We know the names of some of them. There would be an education in Latin. Mostly, the boys would had to speak Latin as well as to read it. Even in the playground, they were expected to speak Latin. The only thing is, and there were no records or registers from the school at that time that survive. And they also say that young William would have been entitled to a free place at the grammar school because of his father, John Shakespeare's position on the town council at that time. So let's get back to our video here. And the only problem I have, and it's not my intention to trash Stratford's grammar school, there's no proof Stratford ever attended school. But a lot of Stratfordians make it like it's a fact. It says right here, William started at the King Edward VI Grammar School when he was 7. And so they go on and on like it is this is a fact. They started at 6 or 7 in the morning and finished at 5 or 6 in the evening with a 2-hour break for dinner. I just don't agree with that. Is it classist to determine where William grew up? William's 2 older infant sisters, Margaret and Joan, died of the plague. Would it be unreasonable for William's parents to want to move out of town to self-quarantine and be socially distant? Who wants the plague? So here's evidence John Shakespeare did not live in town. Reason 1, Henry Higford, gentleman, also called Henry Higford of Solihull. He appeared on the 4th day of the Easter term, looking for this widower, otherwise called John Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon, and this is April 11th, 1573. Now, a widower is a person who works on leather. Now, notice how it says late of Stratford-upon-Avon right here. This means in 1573, well, Higford cannot find John Shakespeare. He recently lived there or worked there, but he's no longer there. If John lived on a farm, would William go to school? William was born in 1564, so in 1573, when Higford cannot find John, William would have been 9 years old. And remember, grammar school would have taken place from age 7 to 14, or from 1571 through 1578. People like the sheriff, the lawyer, Henry Higford, and Shakespeare's scholars assume John Shakespeare lived in town. Why? Because he bought a house on Henley Street in 1556, 8 years before William was born. And back then, John called himself a glover, right? And we can see it here at Shakespeare Documented. On June 17th, 1556, Thomas Such brought a case against John Shakespeare in the county of Warwick, a glover. And it says right there. And he wanted him to return £8. But John palters between a glover and a yeoman. And by palter, I mean to be misleading, to manipulate others. In 1572, in a suit against John Luther, John calls himself a yeoman or farmer. 1575, he again calls himself a yeoman. 1579, he's a farmer. 1597. Now, he could have been saying it because yeoman has a connotation of a respectable standing, a step below a gentleman. So he's kind of saying I'm a big shot. But from 1570 through 1579, when William's supposed to be going to school, John calls himself a yeoman, a farmer who owns his own land. Did he own the land, or was he a tenant farmer like his father? Let's find out. Now, in this document, dated 1570, it says 2 conveyances of property in Warwickshire by William Clopton showing John Shakespeare as a tenant of Ingon Meadow in the parish of Hampton Lucy. So let's look at this thing. And here we see the document. What's cool about this, I'm going to go to page 2 here. And if you click on it, it enlarges. So I'm going to click on it again. Now, if you go and count 20 lines down from this top here, you will find John Shakespeare's name. So, see. Here it is, John Shakespeare, right here, right? Okay, so I'm going to try to read this thing. So this is just kind of a cut and paste thing. And also one other meadow with the appurtenances called or known by the name of Ingon, alias Ingon Meadow, containing, by estimation, 14 acres, be it more or less, now or late in the tenure or occupation of John Shakespeare or his assigns, and also certain arable lands with their appurtenances in the old town of Stratford. In the old town of Stratford, aforesaid, containing 107 acres, after 2 hands to the acre. Interesting, isn't it? Now I want you to notice here also some of his neighbors that also are occupying this property. They're tenants too. Ralph Caudry, then here's Lewis App Williams, and here's John Combs. So they're all tenants. See, I'm in real estate, so I like this kind of stuff. Okay, so the Griffin conveyance is between 2 parties. William Clopton and William Sheldon are the first parties. They're the sellers. The buyers are Rice Griffin and Edmund Griffin. William Clopton and William Sheldon have no reason to lie about the names of their tenant farmers, wouldn't you agree? They're trying to make a deal. And the deal has to be ratified too. So it's got to be truthful. So here are the names again: William Clopton, William Sheldon, and here's the buyers: Rice Griffin and Edward Griffin. So let's keep in mind the names of Clopton's tenants. We talked about Lewis App Williams. Here's John Shakespeare, Ralph Caudry, John Combe, Roger Sadler, Sky Reynolds, Richard Charnock. So all of these guys are the tenants. Now in 1602, Stratford purchases 107 acres. Why? Didn't you ever wonder that? So here is the deed here. It's called the Combe Conveyance. And what's cool is that sometimes they include these descriptions, and sometimes you can expand on things, find out more information. This talks about a yard of land. So this says this estimate would have put Shakespeare's Purchase at 120 acres. Now, isn't that interesting? If you think about it, I'm going to go back here. Could this be the same property he knew growing up as a child? I mean, why would he pay so much money to purchase random farmland as an adult? If you add it up, 107 plus 14 is 121 acres, right? And then later, okay, so we have 107 acres plus 14 acres is 121 acres. Then later, John gifts the Shakespeare Close to William in his will. Now today there is what I think an academic basis, meaning that scholars say we shall ignore anyone who differs from our interpretation of the documents posted on the Folger website. And here's what I mean. So here's John Combs' last will and testament. And again, if we look at what this means, we see that here that John Combe bequeaths to Mr. William Shakespeare £5. And also, or incidentally, Combs' will alludes to a plot of land called or known by the name of Parson's Close, alias Shakespeare's Close in Bishop's Hampton, also known as Hampton Lucy, in Warwickshire. Now, look at this. No connection is known to the Shakespeare family of Stratford upon Avon. Rather, this place name is just a large body of evidence that Shakespeare was a common name. Can you believe that? That's To me, that's kind of ridiculous. They just don't want to accept the truth here. What if William walked 5 miles to school like Abe Lincoln? Okay, he lived out on the farm and he just walked to school. He could do that, couldn't he? Well, in 1571 and 1572, John Shakespeare bought large quantities of wool. It's very well known about this. And when John left to sell the wool, who became responsible for helping Mom with their 6 children? The oldest son is always going to be the most responsible one. They're going to stick it to him to raise the younger ones. And if you look at Gilbert's signature over here, he has a more refined signature, meaning that I think William had to stay and be the responsible one, and Gilbert walked to school. Just like Abe Lincoln was a middle child. He had 2 siblings, one older one who had to watch the younger one while Abe walked to school. Just check out William's signatures. He's got 5 signatures here that look nothing like Gilbert's. Okay, here's proof that John lived in town. These things prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that John Shakespeare lived in the town of Stratford-upon-Avon. He must have rented that farmhouse out to someone else. Number 1, John Shakespeare witnessed a deed for a neighbor in 1575. Number 2, John was involved in town politics. And number 3, John baptized his children at the Holy Trinity Church. All these things prove that John lived in town. Well, let's look at it. John baptized his daughter Margaret at the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon. Here we can see her name, Margaret, Philia of Johann Shakespeare, right? Does this prove he lived close to the school? Well, his farm neighbor, Ralph Cawdry, also did. He baptized his children there too. So did William Clopton. John was elected to important town positions, but we see his farm neighbors' names here too. So John could live on a farm at Ingon Meadow and still be involved in Stratford politics. You see John's name here? Now that looks like William Combe with the E here. John Combe with the E. This E is supposed to be there at the end. This looks like Reynolds, doesn't it? How about Ralph Cawdry here? Or maybe this name. Anyway, let's keep going. John Shakespeare, we see the name right there. But we also see Lewis Ap Williams, don't we? Roger Sadler up here. This happened when John was elected High Bailiff in 1568. 1575, John witnessed a neighbor's deed. So this document proves John owned a house on Henley Street, right? So here's the document. Again, if you double click it, you can see for yourself. Here's John Shakespeare, yeoman. You see that? He's calling himself a yeoman. So does it really mean that he is occupying that house? He could have rented it, right? Remember, people who look for John could not find him living at Henley Street. But who was the person looking for him? John Higford. If John was living in town on Henley Street in 1573 and 1578, why can't Henry Higford find him? And who was Henry Higford anyway? Attorney Henry Higford was the steward or former steward who represented the Stratford-upon-Avon Corporation. He met with John at a meeting on September 11th, 1566. So he was the one who called him in on distraint of goods. He was ordered to come in. This is in 1566. And we can see the signature there, can't you? Henry Higford. Right here. So we know that Higford would know what John Shakespeare would look like. Now, if you own a house but cannot be found there, and you're also listed as a tenant of a farm located 5 miles away, where are you living? You're probably living on that farm, aren't you? On October 21st, 1575, John purchased 2 messuages. And I don't think you need me to click this link, but he purchased them. Might William's Latin education have started in 1575 or 1576 when he was now 11 or 12 years old? Maybe, but remember, Mr. Higford can't find him in 1578. But it is possible his education at the grammar school could have started then. Did John buy the 2 messuages because he had to? Or, perhaps his 14-acre farm lease was about to expire. If he had already rented out Henley Street and Mr. Rice Griffin did not extend the farm lease, or he wanted more money for it, John was in a pinch. Where would his family go? And what would John do? He couldn't be selling wool, right? So maybe John then became a butcher. Now, this is a letter from Warwickshire dated 1693, where this gentleman went to Warwickshire, went to Stratford upon Avon, found a clerk there that was 80 years old who knew the Shakespeare. The Shakespeare was formerly in this town bound apprentice to a butcher. But then he ran from his master to London, and there was received into the playhouse as a servitor. He was the best of his family, but the male line is extinguished. Not one for fear of the curse above said dare touch his gravestone. And here's that curse, the one that we know it belongs to William Shakespeare. Would this 80-year-old man lie? I don't know. John's financial problems were well known, mainly for debt, wool dealing without a license, and usury. That means lending money with interest. And these all happened around 1573 to 1578. So it's questionable whether John would really move back to town. Can a Latin education be proven for Stratford? No. Would 3 years of Latin allow Stratford to read all the source material and then do the writing and rewriting between the years 1592 to 1594? Now, my wife is from Guatemala, and she speaks fluent Spanish. Me, I took 3 years of high school Spanish, but then I scored higher than my wife on an online Spanish test. Woohoo, right? My friends say, well, she probably threw that test for you. You've got a good wife. My point is, who do you think understands Spanish better, me or my wife? My wife does, right? I'll tell you a story. One time, we went to a house where some Spanish-speaking people owned the house. They wanted to list it. And I said to my wife, let me handle the introduction. When you first meet someone, you want to establish rapport. Like if they have golf clubs, you say, hey, looks like you like to play golf. I do too. That kind of thing. Well, they had these 2 poodles that had been recently groomed. And I wanted to impress them with my Spanish. So I wanted to say, your dogs smell good. Or sus perros huelen rico in Spanish. But I have a hard time ruling my R's. So it came out more like sus pedos huelen rico. Now, I could see the twinkle in their eyes, and they were trying to suppress a smile. I looked over at my wife. She was rolling her eyes. She had her arms folded. And she said to me later, she said, do you realize what you said? I said, no. I mean, your dogs smell good, right? She said, no. You said your farts smell delicious. Anyway, I think it's time for a bathroom break. Time to get some coffee, or feel free to grab a snack, drink some wine, or maybe cut some cheese. Anyway, that's the end of part 1, to be continued in part 2.